Hi, we're here today to talk about company voluntary arrangements and how they impact on landlords. So 2018 has been a big year for CVAs. We've seen a lot of high street retailers closing, restructuring. Firstly, Nigel, what is a CVA?
CVA is an insolvency procedure that's very flexible and governed by the Insolvency Act. It means that you can restructure your liabilities provided that you get 75% of unsecured creditors approving the CVA proposal.
So now we know what they are. Why has there been such a big rise in 2018?
There's really a number of reasons, Nick. One big thing is that the number of the portfolios of retailers are very large, and they're in the wrong location, they're the wrong size, they're in the wrong region or whatever, and that's moving very quickly, and the need to restructure is paramount. Declining margins, very competitive landscape, whilst there's rising costs, so things like the apprenticeship levy, business rates, the minimum wage have all been a feature of many of the CVAs in 2018. I think also changing consumer habits, the online offering, and the challenge now to get landlords and tenants aligned.
In a lot of the press reporting on CVAs, we've seen a big focus on the impact on the high street, but how can a CVA affect landlords?
You're right, Nick. The CVAs have had a material impact on landlords. There's three main ways. It's in relation to the current rent, which is compromised, future rent and dilapidations, which are all compromised. It's also a situation where each landlord needs to assess their own particular situation, because CVAs distinguish between different categories of properties, so between the closed and open stores, and then there's often a hybrid where stores may be viable if there's a sizable reduction in the rent.
So, Gary, with that in mind, how can landlords protect their interests before a CVA is contemplated?
Most likely that will be through lease drafting. For example, one would expect a landlord to request a guarantor, and in doing so perhaps extend those terms so that any shortfall between the passing rent and the CVA reduced rent would be picked up. Also, forfeiture, bring forward the trigger event to approval rather than just the date the CVA is passed. And Nick, it's also about what one resists, and I have in mind there the next clause where tenants can benefit from the reduced rent being offered to neighbours who have got the benefit of a CVA.
So, Gary, when a CVA is starting to look likely, what steps do landlords need to take?
Well, I'd expect the landlord to already be in dialogue with an insolvency practitioner, but if they have not reached out, the landlord should be proactive in seeking that information. The first thing I would do is be looking at the forfeiture option, because that may well be the right move depending on the market and the location of property. And if not, then prompt action, because the timescales are very tight, the CVA terms are very complicated and voluminous often, with many traps for the unwary. Landlords should be looking to maximise their voting rights, because any unascertained sums, for example dilapidations, would, absent evidence, be given a notional £1 value. And perhaps also consider acting in concert with other landlords and creditors to maximise leverage for modification and or rejection of the CVA proposal. Overall, I'd say be realistic.
So following on from that, is there any way a landlord can challenge a CVA?
Absolutely. My team have successfully challenged a CVA in the past. It needs to be done within 28 days, but there are limited grounds. One must look for either material irregularity, which is essentially a breach of the process and the formalities, and also the alternative would be unfair prejudice, which will be considered at the time the CVA, the information available when the CVA is approved. One must look at unfairness and prejudice as two distinct terms. Prejudice is easy. I'm left in a less favourable position after a CVA than before it. Unfairness is more nuanced. There's no universal test. One must consider all the factors, the alternate insolvency regimes that may be available, and the impact of those other regimes.
So, try as we might, we can't ignore Brexit. With this looming, what kind of things are you expecting in the future for CVAs?
I think there's probably more to come. I think anecdotally there's definitely more economic uncertainty. There's the issue of Brexit, and when we look at the first quarter of 2018, that was the quarter with most activity of CVAs. There's a few reasons for that. It's obviously off the back of the Christmas trading period, the need to pay the next month's or quarter's rent. It's usually the time when a big VAT liability arises as well. So a mixture of reasons where we're expecting 2019 to be active again. More again for landlords to be in tune with the market, to be really aware of the situation with their tenants and be speaking to them at all times. We're also aware that the British Property Federation have got concerns about the way that some CVAs are conducted, and they're looking at a code of conduct to put in place, and that is progressing. So overall, I think it could be an interesting period in 2019 with a lot more activity, and potentially some of the CVAs may fail and move into administration, which raises other challenges, but it may not be quite as detrimental as some people think.